Today we're going to talk about the representation of data. Now, this lesson doesn't really have a lot of questions that go along with it as much as it just requires you to understand the different types of data and how we can represent them. So not only is this helpful now, but this will be helpful in the future for future classes, for future examples we go over. You will see all of these different data or the different types of representation we can use with data. So just to go through a couple of the basic ones that you've probably seen before, but we'll label them. Starting with right here, we have what we call a pie chart. And you can see that the data is organized by percentage and also color coded. You can see the smaller or larger sections of the circle. This right here, the second one, we would call this a bar graph. After the bar graph, we see what looks like another bar graph, but you can see every column on that has three sections, a gray, a blue, and a purple section. We specifically call this a stacked bar graph. We have a line graph. Next, we have a frequency table. And lastly, we have a dot plot. So it's important that you recognize all these different methods for organizing data, and in the future, you'll have to identify which ones you're using or which ones are the most effective to use. Another piece of information that's important when you are indicating the relationships between sets of data is the correlation. So there's a lot of examples of correlation, and we're going to start with the first graph. This first graph has a strong positive correlation. This is heading in the positive direction with the X and Y axis, and you can see when I draw that pink line, all of the dots are pretty close to the line. So I would call this a strong positive correlation. Whereas this next graph, it looks like these points are still going up, kind of, but they're definitely more spread out. They're not nice and close to that pink line I just drew in. So we would call this a weak positive correlation. Next, we have descending points with respect to the X and Y axis. So we call this a strong negative correlation. It's strong because the points all fall very close to the line. This here is a weak negative correlation. And then lastly, this graph, it wouldn't really be easy for me to draw a line either way. It looks like these points are just all over the graph. So we would say this has no correlation. Okay, the next type of data that we're looking at is quantitative versus qualitative. Looking at quantitative first. Quantitative is structured data. It's statistical analysis. It has objective conclusions, and it consists of surveys and experiments. So, quantitative, think of numbers. So, exact numbers, or you have numbers for something. Versus qualitative research, And qualitative research represents unstructured data. It's just a summary of information, subjective conclusions, and it's based on interviews, focus groups, and observations. So it is not based on numbers, it's kind of based on what you think or what you observe from a group of people. So quantitative is numbers, qualitative is not. And I put a little graphic here just to indicate the difference between the two methods. You can see the quantitative graphic. It says only 1 in 30 take the free ice cream. That's interesting. Where the qualitative method says, what do you feel you saw when you saw the free ice cream? Oh, sorry, what did you feel when you saw the free ice cream? And then it talks about the feelings of the people. All right, this doesn't talk about numbers at all, where the quantitative one does. It references an exact number of people that take the free ice cream. Let's take a look at some examples, and we need to identify if it's representing quantitative or qualitative research. I'm going to abbreviate quantitative as QNT. And remember, this is numbers. And I'm going to abbreviate as qualitative as just QL. And qualitative is observations. So the first one says the plant is short. Well, it doesn't give us an exact measurement of the plant, it just says that it's short. So I would say that's an observation, and that would be qualitative research. Number 2 says one leaf is 9 centimeters long. That's an exact number. That is the actual length. So that is data that is proof of the length of the length of the leaf. This is quantitative. And for the third question, the temperature of the room increases by 8 degrees. This is also quantitative. That's an exact number. We know that the temperature is increasing. It's not an observation, it is a concrete fact. So quantitative. I know today's lesson was short. Basically, it just talks about different ways to represent data, whether it's a pie graph, a bar graph, a line graph, whether you're talking about positive or negative correlation, whether you're talking about qualitative or quantitative research. This is just an overview of how we can represent things. We're not going to go much further into this, but you will see it in the future. You will see different representations of data in both this class and next year in Algebra 2. Please let me know if you have any questions.